What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for MLB Monday, August 16th.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon.
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top DFS picks for today's MLB slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, we have a 10-game slate tonight, so let's take a look at the pitcher position. I like Garrett Cole with a 12% pitching advantage over a low-salary batting team, the Los Angeles Angels. Garrett Cole pitches his best ball versus righty batters, only giving up a .556 OPS versus righties, and he's facing 6 righties here tonight. Now on top of that, the Angels have only hit 15 of his last 66 pitches. That's a .227 batting average. He's 11,400 FanDuel salary, and he's 500 less on DraftKings. Now he's projected at 28 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can score 35 fantasy points or more in this one. He has an ERA of 3.11. His record is 10-6 on the season, pitching an average of 100 pitches per game, averaging 43 fantasy points per game. He scored 25, 30, and 58 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Garrett Cole here versus the Los Angeles Angels. Okay, let's take a look at the catcher first base position. I like CJ Cron with a 6% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Ryan Weathers. CJ Cron is batting a .793 OPS versus lefties, and Ryan Weathers, he's pitching 18% better versus righties as he does lefties, giving up a .838 OPS versus righties. CJ Cron is 2 for 4 with a 1.850 OPS versus Weathers. One of those 2 hits is a home run. He's 4,000 FanDuel salary, 800 more on DraftKings, projected at 9.9 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 3, 25, and 19 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And I like this pick because Vegas thinks this is going to be a super high scoring game. 12 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like CJ Cron here versus Ryan Weathers. Now I also like Buster Posey with a 24% batting advantage over Rich Hill. Buster Posey is batting 13% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a 1.065 OPS versus lefties, and Rich Hill, he pitches 11% worse to righties as he does lefties, giving up a .627 OPS versus righties. Now Buster Posey is 10 for 20, batting 500 with a 1.224 OPS versus Hill. So yeah, that's why I like this pick. He's got great batter versus pitcher history, and he's 3,400 FanDuel salary and only 600 more on DraftKings. Projected at 9.2 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 3, 9, and 22 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Buster Posey here versus Rich Hill. Okay, now I got a value play for you. Take a look at Robinson Coronos with a 98% batting advantage over Wade Miley. Robinson Coronos, he's batting 38% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a 1.006 OPS versus lefties, and Wade Miley, he pitches his worst ball by far to righty batters. 59% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .920 OPS versus righties. And Robinson Coronos is 3 for 11, batting .273 batting average and a .909 OPS versus Miley. Now I like this pick because he's only $2,300 FanDuel salary and $400 more on DraftKings. Projected at 11.3 fantasy points here tonight. Now he's only averaging 6 fantasy points per game on the season, but he scored 15, 37, and 6 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 9.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Robinson Coronos here versus Wade Miley.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on.
Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. Okay, let's take a look at the second base position. I like Brendan Rodgers with a 47% batting advantage over a low-salary pitcher, Ryan Weathers. Brendan Rodgers is batting 30% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .654 OPS versus lefties. And Ryan Weathers, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 18% worse than his pitch to lefties, giving up a .838 OPS versus righties. Brendan Rodgers is 2 for 3 with a 2.334 OPS versus Weathers. One of those 2 hits is a home run. He's only $3,300 FanDuel salary. He's $1,400 more on DraftKings. Projected at 8.8 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 0, 9, and 6 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 12 runs scored in this game, so it's a great game to stack. So I like Brendan Rodgers here versus Ryan Weathers. I also like Jeff McNeil with a 38% batting advantage over Kevin Gausman. Jeff McNeil is batting 14% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .807 OPS versus righties. And Kevin Gausman, he pitches his worst ball versus lefty batters, 24% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .710 OPS versus lefties. Jeff McNeil is 4 for 6, batting a .667 batting average and a 1.5 OPS versus Gausman. He's only $2,600 FanDuel salary, but now he's $2,300 more on DraftKings, so I love that FanDuel price, and he's projected at 10.6 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 8 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 7, 0, and 10 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Jeff McNeil here versus Kevin Gausman. And this play just caught my eye. It looks like Whit Merrifield is in a good spot here with a small batting advantage over Jake Odorizzi. Whit Merrifield is batting a .721 OPS versus righties, and Jake Odorizzi, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 10% worse than his pitch to lefties, giving up a .933 OPS versus righties. But I like this pick because Whit Merrifield is 9 for 21, batting a .429 batting average and a 1.430 OPS versus Odorizzi. And 3 of those 9 hits are for home runs. He's $3,700 FanDuel salary, $700 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.8 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 3, 22, and 3 fantasy points in his last 3 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 10.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Whit Merrifield here versus Jake Odorizzi.
Okay, let's take a look at the third base position. I like Joey Wendell. So this is a value play. Joey Wendell has a 10% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Matt Harvey. Joey Wendell is batting 26% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .809 OPS versus righties, and Matt Harvey is giving up a .915 OPS versus lefties. Joey Wendell is 1-for-1 with a 2 OPS versus Harvey, and he's only $2,500 FanDuel salary. He's $1,600 more on DraftKings, projected at 9.1 fantasy points here tonight. He's averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 3, 3, and 10 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Joey Wendell here versus Matt Harvey. And I just caught this pick as well. If you have a little bit more salary, it actually looks like he's not priced up as much on DraftKings. So on DraftKings, I would play this guy instead of Joey Wendell. Take a look at Josh Donaldson with a 27% batting advantage over Cal Quantrill. Josh Donaldson is batting 13% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .840 OPS versus righties. And Cal Quantrill, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 14% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .749 OPS versus righties. Josh Donaldson is 3 for 6, batting .500 with a 1.5 OPS versus Quantrill. One of those 3 hits is a home run. And he's only $3,000 FanDuel salary, and he's only $400 more on DraftKings. So I love that DraftKings price, projected at 13.7 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 20, 12, and 3 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 9.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Josh Donaldson here versus Cal Quantrill. Okay, who do we have at the shortstop position? I like Kyle Farmer with a 70% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Justin Steele. Kyle Farmer is batting 34% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .885 OPS versus lefties. And Justin Steele, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 36% worse than his pitch to lefties, giving up a .760 OPS versus righties. Kyle Farmer is 1 for 2 with a 1 OPS versus Steele. He's $3,100 FanDuel salary, $800 more on DraftKings, projected at 8.4 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 7 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 9, 3, and 22 fantasy points in his last 3 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 9.5 runs scored in this game, so that's their over-under. So I like Kyle Farmer here versus Justin Steele. Okay, moving on to the outfield position. I like Michael Brantley with a 33% batting advantage over a low-salary pitcher, Carlos Hernandez. Michael Brantley is batting 30% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .944 OPS versus righties, and Carlos Hernandez is giving up a .802 OPS versus lefties. Now there's no at-bats versus Hernandez yet, but Michael Brantley is only $3,000 FanDuel salary, only $300 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.7 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 22 and 15 fantasy points in his last 2 games. I also like this pick because Vegas thinks there's going to be 10.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. This guy's been underpriced when he's been facing righty pitchers throughout the whole season. Now, finally, DraftKings has raised his price a little bit, but he was a steal on DraftKings versus righty pitchers for quite a while. But his price is still pretty low on both sites, considering the guy's got a .944 OPS versus righties. So I like Michael Brantley here versus
Carlos Hernandez. Okay, now I've got a couple of killer value plays for you. Now, I don't know how killer they're going to be when the night is over, but take a look at Chas McCormick with a 12% batting advantage over that same low salary pitcher, Carlos Hernandez. Chas McCormick, he's batting 14% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .811 OPS versus righties, and Carlos Hernandez is giving up a .781 OPS versus righties. Now, there's no at-bats versus Hernandez yet, but Chas McCormick is only $2,300 FanDuel salary, and he's 100 less on DraftKings, projected at 9.3 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 8 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 6, 9, and 3 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 10.5 runs scored in this game. Lots of fantasy points to go around. So I like Chas McCormick here versus Carlos Hernandez. Now, if you want to add this guy to your stack and get a ton of savings for the rest of your lineup, take a look at Jake Myers with a 12% batting advantage over that same low salary pitcher, Carlos Hernandez. Jake Myers is batting a 1.257 OPS versus righties. We know Carlos Hernandez is giving up a .781 OPS versus righties. There's no at-bats versus Hernandez yet, and Jake Myers is only $2,400 FanDuel salary, and he's 400 less on DraftKings. Projected at 8.7 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 3, 48, and 12 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Jake Myers here versus Carlos Hernandez.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.